Okay, and we're back and looking at bread. So you might have already gotten a chance to watch my crumb video on some different breads, but here are the different types of crumb structures you might see in bread. So there's the fine cell. They call this the optimal crumb, but I think that really depends on texture, not preference. But you could see that there's really small holes in this slice of bread, just similar to the multigrain that I showed you guys. Then there is your dense crumb. That's going to have some small air cells in it. And then finally, your irregular crumb, which has your large air cells. This is going to be like the baguette that I showed you. And it really just depends on your fermentation process, what kind of yeast you used, what kind of flour you used. It will depend on what kind of crumb you get. So fermentation gases produce the pores that you see in bread, these little holes that you see. So problems with texture. You can have over fermentation, which gives you a like moth-eaten appearance with large open cells and a coarse texture. Or you can have under fermentation, and this is going to give a much denser loaf with thick cells, low volume, and a tough crust. In order to test if a loaf of bread is done, you're going to tap the bottom of the bread, and if it sounds hollow, then you know it's done. You also want to have an internal temperature of greater than 195 degrees Fahrenheit. So to adjust for high altitudes, which is an RD exam question, you need less leavening if needed. Less leavening is needed because there's less atmospheric pressure at higher altitudes pushing down the dough or batter. So less leavening. More liquids will be needed because they evaporate more quickly. Breads will bake faster in high altitudes, and oven temperatures should be increased slightly to help proteins coagulate better. So this is just a chart with causes, problems that may happen with yeast breads and their causes. There's way too many to go over all of these, but this is in your textbook if you're interested. So here's a really important thing about bread is calorie portion. So a standard slice of bread has about 80 calories and is considered 15, has 15 grams of carbohydrates. So that's like one serving of carbohydrates, one slice of bread. And a lot of people, if you're eating a sandwich, you eat two slices. Sometimes you have it with toast. Um, Whole grains always better. We know that it has fiber, more fiber. And then another way to like minimize calories is with pizza. You always want to go with a thin pizza versus a thick pizza because the pizza dough itself will have less calories and fat compared to with a thicker pizza. So 130 calories and 4 grams of fat with a thin slice, whereas a thick slice has 400 calories and 11 grams of fat. I personally really like a nice thin crust, wood fired or oven baked pizza. So it's fine with me. So other types of yeast breads. So some specialty breads include rye, country or hearth bread, steamed bread, stone mason bread, multiple grains or multigrain, and then health modified. You can see all of these different things that fall under yeast bread category though. So pizza crust is a yeast bread, rolls and croissants, pretzels are yeast breads, raised donuts. So those are going to be your fluffy donuts, not your cakey donuts. Pita bread, English muffins, bagels, all are yeast breads. So storing breads. So breads should be consumed within 1 to 2 days. Rye bread can last up to a week though. You want to always cool your bread completely before you store it. Then you're going to wrap it and store it in a dry, cool place away from the sun. If you've ever noticed that your bread goes bad so much faster in the warmer months, it's because of the humidity. So if you want to reheat your bread, you do it in the oven, 125 to 145 degrees, and this will help recreate the texture of a fresh bread. You still want to do this within 1 to 2 days. If you don't consume your bread within 1 day or 2 days for soft breads, you want to wrap it up and freeze it. Freezing is ideal versus refrigerating because refrigerating actually speeds up staling of bread. So you could freeze between two layers of plastic wrap dated and labeled. I also freeze my bread in freezer bags and that works perfectly fine. So you can refrigerate breads if you live in a warm temperature and moist, humid tropic regions. However, like I said before, refrigerating breads is not ideal because it speeds up staling. So you can just freeze it instead. Oh, and freezing will stop that staling process for a little bit longer. So what happens for staling? What's the process that happens? The crust toughens, the crumb becomes less elastic and more firm, and you lose some moisture and flavor. To prevent staling, a lot of processed breads have added mono and diglycerides or fat and sodium or calcium propionate to retard the mold and bacteria growth that can cause rope. I'm sure you guys have read, or next time you go to pick up a package of bread at the store, read the ingredients. You'll probably see one of these. I'm really like anti those ingredients because I feel like they add like a different texture to the bread. So I really look for breads that have just flour, water, and yeast in them, or minimal ingredients. There is a brand that I buy. It's called Heidelberg's, and it's a New York bread. And they really don't use any preservatives in their bread. Goes bad faster, but I just stick it in the freezer if I'm not going to eat it right away. So something else that can happen to bread is rope. This is a sticky, moist bacteria in breads, which is caused by Bacillus mesentericus. And this can cause illness and usually occurs in the summer months. So it's really tricky because the bread looks totally normal on the outside, but in the inside, it's mushy or stringy. The bacteria is able to survive baking temperatures, and it can cause vomiting and diarrhea. I've actually never seen this, but it sounds pretty gross. And that's it. If you have any questions on yeast breads, please feel free to reach out to me. And we'll pick up next week with some more lectures with sweeteners, I think. All right, thanks. Have a great weekend.